Have you ever felt it? That quiet, unsettling feeling that the thoughts you're thinking, the emotions you're feeling, and the choices you're making are not entirely your own? If this message has found you, it is not by accident. It is a sign, a vibrational match to a question your soul has been whispering in the dark. This is a space for those who feel the subtle strings of an unseen world, for those who are beginning to awaken to a deeper truth. You are not imagining things. You are not alone. And what you are about to understand will change the very fabric of your reality. If you feel a stirring within you, a resonance that says, yes, this is for me, then I invite you to stay, to listen with your heart. Let the world know you are here by liking this video, subscribing for more truths, and sharing in the comments a simple I resonate or a 777 to anchor this awakening energy. You are part of a great shift, and your presence here is a testament to your courage. Have you ever wondered if the voice in your head isn't fully yours? If the thoughts you're thinking, the emotions you're feeling, and the choices you keep making are being quietly shaped by something unseen, something you didn't consciously choose? If that question stirs something in you, this message didn't arrive by chance. It's a vibrational echo response to a silent question your soul has been whispering for years. This space is for those who feel the pull beneath the noise, who sense the world isn't what it seems, and who can no longer pretend they're asleep. You're not imagining things. You're not alone. And what you're about to remember may change everything. If something inside you just whispered, yes, this is for me, stay, listen with your whole being. Let the world know you're awake by liking this video, subscribing for more, and anchoring your energy with a simple I resonate or 777 in the comments. You're not here by accident. You're here because you're ready. Every single interaction you have in the digital realm is a whisper to these systems. Every scroll through an endless feed, a momentary hesitation that reveals a flicker of interest. Every tap of a heart icon, a declaration of your emotional state. Every second of silence you allow before you click on the next distraction is a piece of data, a breadcrumb leading back to the core of your psyche. And you must know with absolute certainty that someone, or rather something, is watching. This is not the curious gaze of a benevolent observer. This is the cold, calculating observation of a system with a singular intention: to understand you better than you understand yourself, so that it may predict and steer your future. There is a profound reason why you suddenly think of a long-lost friend, only to see them appear in your feed moments later. There's a reason a fleeting anxiety about your career is met with a perfectly timed ad for a life coaching seminar. It is not merely your phone listening in. That would be far too obvious, too crude for the level of sophistication we are dealing with. What is truly happening is a phenomenon far more pervasive and powerful. Your behaviors, your desires, and your future actions are being predicted with staggering accuracy, often before you have even consciously formed the intention to act. The intricate web of your digital footprint paints a portrait of you that is more detailed, more intimate, and more predictive than what even your closest loved ones could ever know. That fleeting moment you hesitated on a post, lingering for just half a second longer than your usual rhythm, that pause is logged, analyzed, and added to your profile. The unique pattern of your swipes, the cadence of your nighttime scrolling when your defenses are down, the exact moment you choose to pause a video, revealing what truly captures or repels you, is all part of a vast, ever-growing profile. This profile is a living, breathing digital doppelganger, an entity that knows your triggers, your weaknesses, and your desires. You believe you are the one watching the screen, the one in control of the remote. But what if the screen is also watching you? What if the digital mirror is not just reflecting you, but actively shaping the reflection it shows back? This is not some wild, unfounded conspiracy theory. This is the stark reality of behavioral psychology wrapped in trillions of lines of code. This is the science of human conditioning deployed on a global scale. It's not a single person in a dark room watching you. It is vast, interconnected systems trained with unfathomable amounts of data to know precisely how long you will stay focused, what type of content you will chase for a dopamine hit, and which specific ideas, fears, or outrages will stir your emotions just enough to make you stay engaged just a little bit longer. And every second longer you stay, the system learns, refines, and tightens its invisible grip. But here is where the story takes a deeply unsettling, personal turn. The longer you interact with these systems, the more this invisible mirror ceases to simply reflect what you are. Instead, it begins to actively project who you are becoming. It is a subtle, almost imperceptible feedback loop. The system shows you a version of yourself, and by engaging with it, you become more like that version. We, as human beings, carry a deep, innate desire to believe we are in full control, that we possess complete sovereignty over our choices. We like to think that we know precisely why we click, why we react, why we believe the things we do. But the uncomfortable truth is that most of these impulses have already been nudged, gently guided, and subtly influenced in a direction that serves an agenda other than your own soul's evolution. And here is the most terrifying part of this entire dynamic. The process is never aggressive. It is always subtle. It is so masterfully woven into your experience that you never ever notice the manipulation. You are not overtly told what to think or what to believe. Instead, you are simply placed within a carefully curated digital environment, a garden where your thoughts are not your own but are guided to grow in specific, predetermined directions. You are handed a menu of choices every day, but that menu has been meticulously engineered based on your predicted mood, your fatigue levels, your latent desires, and your deepest fears. These systems, these unseen architects of reality, have no need to control you directly. Why would they? It is far more effective to simply influence the sacred space around your mind. For example, have you ever noticed how, after scrolling through a stream of motivational or hustle culture content for a few minutes, you suddenly feel a surge of guilt or an urgent need to improve yourself? That feeling was not a spontaneous awakening of discipline from within. It was a calculated emotional response triggered by the system, which has learned that this specific type of content makes you stay engaged longer, and once you stay, the loop is complete. The system feeds you what keeps you there, and your engagement confirms to the system that the strategy is working. But here is the real existential danger in this cycle. You begin to mistake what is being shown to you for what you truly believe. Over time, your own precious inner voice, the divine guidance from your higher self, starts to sound less and less like you and more like the echo of the system that has been shaping it. You might find yourself quoting thoughts that are not truly yours, adopting worldviews that were spoon-fed to you in tiny digestible doses until they felt completely natural. And worst of all, you might not even question where these new beliefs came from because they feel so comfortable, so familiar. And you must understand, this silent shaping of your reality is not just about social media or the screens you hold in your hand. It is so much bigger than that. This silent shaping happens through the algorithms, yes, but it also happens through cultural trends, through the vibration of the music you listen to, through the subtle messaging in advertisements, and even through the conversations you are nudged toward in your personal life. You are constantly walking through a metaphorical hallway of mirrors, but none of these mirrors reflect your true, authentic self clearly. Instead, each mirror reflects back a slightly distorted version of you, a version that has been designed to think, feel, and react in a specific, predictable way. And with enough time and enough exposure, that distorted, programmed version becomes your default reality. But here is the truth that holds the key to your liberation. You are not powerless in this. The very moment you start to consciously notice this influence, the entire game begins to change. The moment you bring the light of your awareness to these subtle manipulations, they begin to lose their grip on your soul. The first step, however, is often uncomfortable. It requires you to start asking profound and sometimes difficult questions. When a strong emotion arises, ask, is this truly me thinking, or is this something I was led to think? Let's zoom in on something most people overlook, the automatic nature of your reactions. You scroll, you click, you feel. It all happens in a blur of milliseconds, but I invite you to pause for a second. Why do you feel so intensely triggered by certain phrases or images? Why do you get that tiny, addictive rush of validation when your opinion is echoed back at you by the digital crowd? That's not just psychology at play. That is a form of programming, not in a science fiction sense, but in a very real-world, brain-level kind of way. Every single time you react emotionally to something, whether it's anger, pride, jealousy, or even hope, your nervous system logs that moment. It learns, it rewires, and over time, it stops needing the external trigger because your own brain has already internalized the pattern. So what happens? You start reacting before you even have a chance to think. You find yourself pulled into arguments, into beliefs, into opinions that are not truly grounded in your core values. They are grounded in predictable, conditioned loops. Your emotional buttons are being pressed by invisible fingers. And the scariest part? Most of the time, you are the one willingly handing over the remote control. This manipulation goes even further, touching the very essence of your identity. Who you think you are, your sense of self, starts to get filtered through this lens. You begin to define yourself based on how others see you, or more accurately, how the system reflects others' views of you. This isn't because you want to be fake or inauthentic, but because the feedback loop of validation and engagement actively rewards it. Be brutally honest with yourself. How many times have you adjusted your voice, your opinions, your preferences, just a little, depending on who you are with? This is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of conditioning. We all do it until we finally see it for what it is. And the ones who are truly watching you, the systems and the people who benefit from your predictability, they're not looking at your face. They are watching your behavior patterns, your micro decisions, your attention span, your insecurities. They don't need your deepest secrets. They just need to map your habits, because habits are infinitely more reliable and predictable than words. Now, here is where it gets truly intense. Once your habits are mapped out, they can be anticipated. And if they can be anticipated, they can be manipulated. Not dramatically, not with some grandiose movie villain twist, but with tiny, little nudges. Just enough to influence where your precious energy goes. Just enough to guide what you ignore and what you obsess over. And so, day by day, your sense of self gets shaped, not by your own inner compass, but by a system that is built to understand your weaknesses even better than you do. But what if you were to reverse that? What if you started watching the watchers, not with paranoia, but with calm, detached awareness? What if you became the observer of your own reactions, not just the reactor? Because the moment you become aware of the influence, it begins to lose its grip. Once you realize you have been flying on autopilot, something miraculous and strange happens. You don't just feel awake, you start to notice how many others are still asleep. You'll see people argue over the same tired points, follow the same fleeting trends, complain about the same manufactured problems day in and day out. And it will hit you with the force of a revelation. They are not responding to reality, they are responding to programming. They are acting out scripts written for them, caught in emotional traps, laid out in headlines, slogans, and carefully framed social media posts. This dynamic exists in our relationships too. Have you ever been in a dynamic where someone always seems to need a reaction from you? Where your silence is treated as a sign of guilt and your disagreement is perceived as a form of betrayal? That is not a conversation, that is a form of surveillance, emotional surveillance. They are not listening to understand. They are watching for a reaction that allows them to control. And sometimes, let's be brutally honest, you have been that person too. Most people don't even realize when they're doing it. We mimic what we have experienced. We internalize the strategies of control because we have been taught to confuse them with love, validation, or strength. But you do not have to stay in that loop. The moment you become aware of how you're being emotionally pulled by a post, by a partner, or even by a voice in your own head, you are gifted with a sacred chance to pause. In that pause, you have the power to zoom out, to see the game, and to choose differently. And that is precisely where your power begins to return to you. Not in some flashy, take back your life kind of way, but in the quiet, sacred space where you no longer react on command. It's the space where you no longer offer your precious attention as a sacrifice to people, narratives, or systems that have not earned the right to it. The question for you now is this: how do you protect your attention, your energy, and your emotional clarity in a world that literally profits from your confusion? This is where this journey starts to get even more personal and even more real. When you start protecting your attention, something else profound happens. The silence gets louder. Not the kind of silence that feels empty and desolate, but the kind that feels potent and revealing. You begin to notice how deeply uncomfortable it is for you and for others to just sit still. No distractions, no scrolling, no reacting. And that discomfort, that is not boredom, that is withdrawal. You are coming off a deep-seated addiction, an addiction to noise, to input, to being constantly stimulated by things outside of yourself. Why? Because if you are not distracted, you might have to face what is really going on inside. And that is the very thing the systems of control never, ever want you to do. You see, when your mind is quiet, your own patterns get louder. The thought loops, the emotional triggers, the deep-seated insecurities, they all show up with nowhere left to hide. And for the first time, you can truly see how much of your personality is just a reaction to things you didn't choose. You see how much of your beliefs were picked up from a need for survival, not from a place of clarity. You see how much of your confidence depends on external feedback. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable, but also incredibly powerful. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You can no longer scroll past your own patterns. You can't keep blaming the world when you realize you've been feeding it the very script of how to control you. But this realization is not about guilt, it is about power. Because that same moment, the moment you see the game, is the moment you start to rewrite the rules. You stop being manipulated by your environment and you start manipulating your internal environment. Instead of reacting, you begin responding. And people will notice. They will notice your pauses, they will notice your calm. They will notice your refusal to jump into the same old emotional traps. They will feel that you are not as easily provoked anymore, not as easily read. And that, to a system built on predictability, is terrifying. Because people who can't be triggered can't be steered. Now, here's something that most people will never tell you. When you take back control of your own attention and your own emotions, your external life begins to shift. But not always in a clean, easy way. Some people will pull away from you. Some of your old, conditioned habits will fight desperately to return. You will be tested, not by some universal punishment, but simply by the natural pull of old momentum. That's all it is, momentum, and you are allowed to slow it down. But to do that, you need something the world rarely teaches: emotional stillness. Not avoidance, not apathy stillness. That means you feel the powerful urge to react, and you don't. You feel the deep need to explain, to defend, to check, to fix, and you don't, not because you are weak, but because you are finally strong enough to hold your own energy without leaking it. That is where the real shift begins, not by changing your outer world first, but by refusing to let the outer world dictate your inner state. And here is the deeper layer we are heading into. What happens when your stillness starts to expose other people's noise? What happens when you no longer participate in their patterns of control and reaction? You will notice something strange. The moment you stop playing the game, the people around you may start to glitch. Not literally, of course, but their reactions will feel off, delayed, confused, even irritated, because your energy no longer confirms the role they have unconsciously assigned to you. You are no longer the agreeable one, the easily manipulated one, or the one who always over-explains. You have stopped feeding the dynamics they are used to. And when that script breaks, so do they, if only for a moment. Every relationship, whether with a person, a job, or even a belief, is a kind of silent, energetic contract. You act this way, they respond that way, you stay predictable, and they stay comfortable. But when you stop fulfilling your part in that unconscious deal, the contract dissolves. And what is left is raw, unfiltered reality. And that can be deeply uncomfortable, not just for them, but for you too. Because now you see who actually respects your sacred space and who is only comfortable when you were easy to control. You'll start hearing things like, "You've changed," or "Why are you being so distant?" or "You're acting cold." But in truth, you are not cold, you are clear. You are not distant, you are centered. And they simply do not know how to relate to you without the old emotional shortcuts. This is the point where most people turn back. They confuse this sacred discomfort with danger, and they retreat into old, familiar patterns just to keep the peace. But that is the ultimate trap, because every time you break your own growth to comfort someone else's expectations, you shrink a little. You send a silent message to yourself: their comfort is more important than my clarity. And that is how we become strangers to ourselves. Not from one big, dramatic betrayal, but from 1,000 small, silent ones. But here's the part that nobody tells you. When you hold your ground, not with anger, but with calm, you actually start attracting new dynamics into your life. You attract people who don't need to manipulate you to feel safe. You attract people who don't ask you to dim your light just so they can feel a little taller. You attract people who speak in honesty, not performance. It is slow at first, and lonely even, but it is real. And what you build from that place of authentic truth is unshakable, because it is not based on fear, it is based on truth. And truth does not require performance, only presence. The more still and authentic you become, the more you reveal what is not. And while that can create tension in a world addicted to noise, it also gives you a freedom that most people will never taste the freedom to exist without constantly negotiating your worth. If this video spoke to something real and true inside of you, do not let it end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more content that challenges your thinking and helps you reclaim your mind, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell. Your growth is not a trend, it's a commitment. Let's keep going.